Welcome back to One Book, One Coffee, where we dive deep into the books that change lives, one page at a time. You know what sets you apart? The fact that you're here right now, choosing to spend your time with Atomic Habits by James Clear. While millions are scrolling through endless feeds or binge-watching another series, you've made a different choice. You've chosen to invest in yourself, to learn something that could genuinely transform how you live and work. That says something remarkable about who you are. Atomic Habits isn't just another self-help book gathering dust on bestseller lists. This is the book that cracked the code on behavior change, the one that finally explains why we fail at forming good habits and how to actually make them stick. Tim Ferriss called it a supremely practical and useful book, and Mark Cuban said it will reshape the way you think about progress and success. When entrepreneurs, athletes, and thought leaders across industries are calling something a game changer, it's worth paying attention. James Clear didn't write this book from an ivory tower. He discovered the power of small changes the hard way, after a devastating baseball injury in high school nearly ended his athletic dreams. Instead of giving up, he became obsessed with the science of improvement, studying how tiny adjustments compound into extraordinary results. What started as personal necessity became a mission to help millions of people build better lives through better habits. Now, a quick note before we dive in. This is a detailed chapter-by-chapter walkthrough, so it's going to be a longer session. Take your time with it. There's no rush. If you need to step away, save this video to your watch later or forward the link to yourself on WhatsApp so you can pick up right where you left off. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's walk through this book together chapter by chapter, idea by idea. Let's begin. Picture this. You're sitting across from me with a warm cup of coffee, and I'm about to share something that could completely change how you think about success, failure, and everything in between. We're diving into James Clear's revolutionary concept of atomic habits, and trust me, this isn't just another self-help theory that sounds good on paper but falls apart in real life. Let me start with a story that'll blow your mind. The British cycling team was, for decades, absolutely terrible. We're talking about 100 years of mediocrity. They were so bad that one of the top bike manufacturers in Europe refused to sell bikes to the team because they were afraid it would hurt their sales. Imagine being that unsuccessful. But then something incredible happened. In 2003, they hired Dave Brailsford as their new performance director, and he had this wild philosophy he called the aggregation of marginal gains. Now think about this for a second. Instead of looking for some massive breakthrough, some revolutionary training method, Brailsford decided to improve everything by just 1%. Everything. They redesigned the bike seats to be more comfortable, rubbed alcohol on the tires for better grip, tested different massage gels to see which one led to the fastest muscle recovery, and even painted the inside of the team truck white to spot any dust that might interfere with bike maintenance. They tested different fabrics to find which was most aerodynamic, and they even brought their own pillows to hotels to ensure the best sleep possible. Each improvement was tiny, almost laughably small, but here's where it gets fascinating. Within 5 years, the British cycling team dominated the Road Cycling World Championship. Then, at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, they won an astounding 60% of the gold medals available. 4 years later, they set 9 Olympic records and 7 world records. And here's the kicker. Bradley Wiggins became the first British cyclist to win the Tour de France, and they repeated that victory with Chris Froome the following year. This is the power of atomic habits in action, and it's exactly what Clear means when he talks about how tiny changes produce remarkable results over time. But here's what most people miss. It works in reverse too. Just as small improvements compound into extraordinary success, small negative habits compound into toxic results. Think about your own life for a moment. When you skip one workout, it doesn't really matter, does it? When you eat one unhealthy meal, your body doesn't change overnight. When you stay up late scrolling through social media just once, you can function the next day. But here's the thing, it's never just once. These small choices, repeated day after day, become the compound interest of self-improvement or self-destruction. Clear uses this brilliant metaphor of an ice cube sitting in a room. Imagine the temperature is 25 degrees Fahrenheit. You decide to warm up the room. 26 degrees, nothing happens. 27, 28, 29, 30 degrees, still nothing. The ice cube sits there, seemingly unchanged by your efforts. Then 31 degrees, and suddenly the ice begins to melt. That 1 degree didn't create all the change. It was the cumulative effect of all the degrees before it. This is exactly how habits work in our lives. You can work out for a month and see minimal changes in the mirror. You can eat healthy for weeks and still feel the same. You can study a new language for months and still struggle with basic conversations. It's easy to get discouraged during this phase, what Clear calls the valley of disappointment, because the results don't match the effort you're putting in. But here's the revolutionary insight. You're not actually behind. You're just in the preparation phase. Think of it like this bamboo can barely be seen for the first 5 years of growth, but in the 6th year, it can grow up to 90 feet in just 6 weeks. Was that 6 weeks when the growth happened? Of course not. It was building an intricate root system for 5 years that made that explosive growth possible. This completely flips the script on how we think about success and failure. We live in a culture obsessed with instant results, with life hacks and shortcuts. We want the body transformation in 30 days, the business breakthrough in 6 months, the skill mastery in a year. But atomic habits teach us that the most powerful changes happen slowly, almost invisibly, until they suddenly become undeniable. The beauty of this approach is that it takes the pressure off. You don't need to completely overhaul your life tomorrow. You don't need to become a different person overnight. You just need to get 1% better today than you were yesterday. And as we'll discover together, that small shift in perspective changes everything about how we approach our goals, our setbacks, and our daily choices. Picture this. You're sitting across from me with your favorite cup of coffee, and I want to share something that completely changed how I think about habits. You know how we usually approach change, right? We set these big, ambitious goals and then try to white-knuckle our way to success. But what if I told you that the most powerful changes happen in a completely different way, one that most people never even consider? Here's the thing that James Clear reveals in Atomic Habits that's absolutely mind-blowing. Your habits aren't just things you do, they're actually votes for the type of person you want to become. Every single time you choose to go for a run, you're casting a vote for being an athletic person. Every time you write a page, you're voting for being a writer. Every time you practice guitar, you're voting for being a musician. It's like democracy, but for your identity. Now think about this for a moment. Most of us have been approaching habits backwards. We say things like, I want to lose 20 pounds, or I want to write a novel, and then we focus entirely on the outcome. But Clear shows us something revolutionary. Instead of focusing on what you want to achieve, focus on who you want to become. The magic question isn't what do I want, but rather who do I want to be? Let me paint you a picture that makes this crystal clear. Imagine 2 people trying to quit smoking. Someone offers them both a cigarette. The first person says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." The second person says, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker." Can you feel the difference in those responses? The first person is still identifying as a smoker who's temporarily abstaining. The second person has shifted their entire identity. They've become a non-smoker at their core. This isn't just semantic wordplay. This is the difference between lasting change and another failed New Year's resolution. When your habits align with your identity, you're not forcing yourself to do something against your nature. You're simply acting in accordance with who you already believe you are. Here's where it gets really fascinating. Clear explains that we have this feedback loop happening constantly between our habits and our identity. Every habit is like a suggestion for our identity. Do something once and it's just an action. Do it repeatedly and it starts to become part of who you are. It's like your brain is keeping score, and after enough repetitions, it updates your self-image. Think about someone learning to play piano. At first, they're just someone taking piano lessons. But after months of daily practice, something shifts. They start thinking of themselves as a pianist. They notice pianos in restaurants, they have opinions about different composers, they might even find themselves tapping out melodies on tables. The habit of practicing piano has gradually transformed their identity. But here's the beautiful part, and this is where Clear's insight becomes incredibly practical for our modern lives. You don't need massive changes to shift your identity. Remember, we're talking about atomic habits, tiny changes that compound over time. If you want to become a reader, you don't need to suddenly start reading 3 books a week. You just need to read 1 page every day. After a few weeks, you'll start thinking of yourself as someone who reads daily. After a few months, you'll be a reader. This completely revolutionizes how we think about motivation too. You know that feeling when motivation runs out and you're trying to force yourself to stick to a habit. That's usually because you're fighting against your identity rather than working with it. But when you focus on becoming the type of person who does that habit naturally, motivation becomes less important. You're not forcing yourself to exercise. You're just being the athletic person you've become. Now, here's something that really hits home in our social media obsessed world. We're constantly bombarded with images of who we should be, what success looks like, what the perfect life contains. But Clear's approach is refreshingly internal and personal. It's not about becoming someone else's version of success. It's about consciously choosing who you want to be and then using your daily habits as votes toward that identity. The practical wisdom here is profound yet simple. Start with identity, not outcomes. Ask yourself who you want to become, then prove it to yourself with small wins. Want to be a writer? Write 1 sentence every day. Want to be organized? Make your bed each morning. Want to be healthy? Drink 1 extra glass of water daily. Each small action is evidence of your new identity, and over time, that evidence becomes undeniable even to yourself. As we move deeper into understanding how habits work, remember this foundational truth. You have the power to reinvent yourself, 1 small habit at a time. Your identity isn't fixed, it's constantly being shaped by your actions. And that, my friend, is both the responsibility and the incredible opportunity that lies in every choice you make today. Picture this. You wake up tomorrow morning, and without even thinking about it, you reach for your phone. Your fingers seem to know exactly where it is on the nightstand. Your thumb automatically swipes to unlock it, and before you're fully conscious, you're scrolling through notifications. Sound familiar? Well, my friend, you've just experienced what James Clear calls the habit loop in action, and it's absolutely fascinating how our brains work behind the scenes. Now, think about this for a moment. How is it that we can perform these complex sequences of actions almost unconsciously? The answer lies in understanding what Clear describes as the 4 fundamental steps that create every single habit we have. It's like having a secret blueprint that your brain follows, whether you're aware of it or not. Let me tell you about a study that perfectly illustrates this. Researchers at MIT studied the brains of rats as they learned to navigate a maze to find chocolate. Initially, the rats' brains were firing like crazy, processing every single detail as they explored. But something remarkable happened as the rats repeated this behavior day after day. Their brain activity actually decreased during the routine parts of the maze running, almost as if their brains were going on autopilot. The neurological activity only spiked at the beginning when they heard the click of the gate opening, and at the end when they got their chocolate reward. Everything in between became automatic. This is exactly what happens in our own lives, and Clear breaks this down into 4 beautifully simple steps that he calls the habit loop. First comes the cue, which is like a trigger that tells your brain to go into automatic mode. Then there's the craving, which is the motivational force behind every habit. Next is the response, which is the actual habit you perform. And finally, there's the reward, which satisfies your craving and teaches your brain that this sequence is worth remembering for next time. Let's make this real with something we can all relate to. Think about your morning coffee routine. The cue might be the sound of your alarm going off. That triggers a craving, not necessarily for caffeine, but for that feeling of being alert and ready to face the day. The response is making and drinking your coffee, and the reward is that satisfying feeling of wakefulness and the pleasant taste that makes you want to repeat this whole sequence tomorrow morning. But here's where it gets really interesting. Your brain doesn't actually distinguish between good and bad habits when it comes to this loop. The same neurological process that helps you remember to brush your teeth also reinforces the habit of checking social media every few minutes. It's completely neutral, which means we can actually hack this system to our advantage. Clear shares a brilliant example about how Procter & Gamble revolutionized the cleaning industry by understanding this habit loop. When they first introduced Febreze, they marketed it as a solution for removing bad odors from smelly rooms. Makes sense, right? But sales were terrible. People weren't buying it because they had become nose blind to their own spaces. They couldn't smell the problem, so there was no cue to trigger the habit of using Febreze. So what did they do? They completely reimagined the product. Instead of positioning Febreze as an odor eliminator, they turned it into the final, satisfying step in a cleaning routine. The cue became finishing your cleaning. The craving was for that sense of completion and freshness. The response was spraying Febreze, and the reward was that pleasant scent that signaled a job well done. Sales skyrocketed because they had successfully inserted their product into an existing habit loop. Now, think about this in terms of building habits in your own life. The genius of understanding these 4 steps is that you can deliberately design each component. Want to start exercising? You need to make the cue obvious, the craving attractive, the response easy, and the reward satisfying. Maybe you put your workout clothes right next to your bed as a visual cue. You create craving by focusing on how great you'll feel after exercising rather than how hard the workout will be. You make the response easy by starting with just 10 minutes. And you reward yourself immediately afterward, perhaps with a satisfying checkmark on a habit tracker or your favorite post-workout smoothie. The beautiful thing about this framework is that it works in reverse too. Want to break a bad habit? Make the cue invisible, the craving unattractive, the response difficult, and the reward unsatisfying. It's like having a master key that unlocks both the creation and destruction of any behavior pattern. What makes this approach so powerful is that it acknowledges something profound about human nature. We're not really rational creatures making conscious decisions all day long. We're habit creatures, running on automatic programs that our brains have learned serve us well. And once you understand the architecture of these programs, you can become the programmer of your own life. This sets us up perfectly to dive deeper into each of these 4 steps and discover exactly how to manipulate them to build the life you want, one small habit at a time. Welcome back, friend. Pour yourself another cup because we're diving into one of the most fascinating stories in atomic habits, and honestly, it's going to change how you think about your living space forever. We're talking about a man who seemed perfectly normal, but somehow felt completely wrong to everyone around him, and how his story unlocks the secret to making good habits effortless. Picture this. It's the 1970s, and there's a man walking through his neighborhood who looks like he belongs, yet somehow doesn't. His clothes fit the era, his haircut matches the style, even his mannerisms seem right for the time. But something's off. People can't quite put their finger on it, but they instinctively know he doesn't belong. What they don't realize is that this man is actually an undercover police officer, and the reason he feels wrong isn't because of anything obvious. It's because of the tiny, almost invisible details that betray his true identity. You see, this officer had been trained in everything from speech patterns to cultural references, but he'd missed the most crucial element: the unconscious behaviors that come from living in a particular environment. The way he held his cigarette, the brand of watch he wore, even how he folded his newspaper, all of these micro-habits screamed that he was from somewhere else entirely. His environment had shaped him differently, and despite his best efforts to fit in, those environmental influences were impossible to hide. Now, think about this for a moment. If our environment shapes us so powerfully that trained professionals can't fully escape its influence, what does that mean for the habits we're trying to build in our daily lives? James Clear uses this story to illuminate something profound. Our environment is the invisible hand that guides our behavior, often without us even realizing it. Here's where it gets really interesting. Most of us are fighting an uphill battle with our habits because we're trying to rely on willpower and motivation while living in environments that work against us. It's like trying to eat healthy while keeping your kitchen stocked with cookies and chips. You might succeed for a day or two, but eventually, your environment wins. The cookies are right there, convenient and calling your name, while the healthy snacks are buried in the back of the fridge. Clear introduces us to the concept of environmental design, and it's honestly like discovering a superpower you never knew you had. Instead of battling your environment, you redesign it to make good habits obvious and bad habits invisible. Think of it as becoming the architect of your own behavior. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in practice. Imagine you want to drink more water throughout the day. The obvious approach might be to set reminders on your phone or try to remember to drink more. But environmental design takes a different approach. You fill up several water bottles and place them strategically around your living space, one on your desk, one by your bed, one in your car. Suddenly, drinking water isn't a decision you have to make. It's the obvious choice because water is everywhere you look. Or consider the guitar that's been gathering dust in your closet. You bought it with the best intentions, maybe even took a few lessons, but somehow you never developed a consistent practice habit. Environmental design suggests taking that guitar out of the closet and placing it right in your living room where you'll see it every day. Better yet, put it on a stand next to your favorite chair. Now, instead of having to remember to practice and then go retrieve the guitar from storage, it's right there, practically inviting you to pick it up. The beauty of this approach is that it works with human nature instead of against it. We're naturally drawn to what's convenient and visible. Our brains are constantly scanning our environment for cues about what to do next, and when we design our spaces thoughtfully, we can hijack this natural tendency to serve our goals. But here's what makes this even more powerful in our modern world. We're not just dealing with physical environments anymore. We're navigating digital environments that are specifically designed to capture our attention. Every app on your phone, every website you visit, every streaming service you subscribe to has been carefully crafted by teams of designers and psychologists to make certain behaviors obvious and irresistible. If you're going to win the habit game in the 21st century, you need to become just as intentional about designing your environment as these companies are about designing theirs. This brings us to a crucial insight that bridges perfectly into our next discussion about making habits attractive. When you make good habits obvious through environmental design, you're not just changing what you see, you're changing what your brain craves. But that's a conversation for another sip of coffee, another moment of discovery in this remarkable journey through the science of small changes. Picture this. You're sitting there with your coffee, maybe it's Monday morning, and you're thinking about that habit you want to build. Maybe it's reading more, exercising regularly, or finally tackling that meditation practice you've been putting off for months. You have the best intentions, you really do. But here's the thing that James Clear wants us to understand: good intentions alone are like trying to build a house with just blueprints and no foundation. They look great on paper, but they crumble the moment real life hits. Now think about this for a moment. How many times have you said, "I'm going to start working out," or "I'm going to eat healthier," without getting specific about when, where, or how? It's like telling someone you'll meet them sometime soon. It sounds nice, but nothing actually happens. This is where Clear introduces us to something that sounds almost too simple to work, but trust me, it's revolutionary. Implementation intentions. An implementation intention is basically giving your habit a time and a place to live. Instead of saying, "I will meditate more," you say, "I will meditate for 10 minutes at 7 a.m. in my bedroom." See the difference? The first one is a wish floating in space. The second one is an appointment with yourself that has coordinates in reality. Clear shares research showing that people who use implementation intentions are 2 to 3 times more likely to actually follow through on their goals. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between success and another abandoned New Year's resolution. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Clear takes this concept and supercharges it with something he calls habit stacking. Imagine your existing habits are like a train that's already moving through your day. Instead of trying to build an entirely new train from scratch, what if you could just add a new car to the existing one? That's exactly what habit stacking does. The formula is beautifully simple. After I do this current habit, I will do my new habit. Maybe it's, after I pour my morning coffee, I will write down 3 things I'm grateful for. Or, after I sit down at my desk, I will take 3 deep breaths before checking my email. You're not trying to create willpower out of thin air, you're borrowing the momentum from something you already do automatically. Think about your morning routine right now. I bet there are things you do without even thinking about them. You probably brush your teeth, check your phone, or make coffee in roughly the same sequence every day. These aren't habits you have to force yourself to remember, they just happen. Clear wants us to see these automatic behaviors as golden opportunities, like having a personal assistant who's already organized your schedule and just needs to know what to add next. One of the most compelling examples Clear shares is about a woman who wanted to start flossing regularly. Instead of relying on motivation or trying to remember to floss sometime before bed, she stacked it onto an existing habit. After I put toothpaste on my toothbrush, I will floss 1 tooth. Just 1 tooth. Now you might be thinking, that's ridiculous, what's the point of flossing just 1 tooth? But here's the brilliant part. Once you're already flossing, it's easier to just keep going. The hard part isn't flossing 32 teeth. It's getting the floss out of the drawer in the first place. This connects to something profound about how our brains work. We like to think we're these rational, decision-making machines, but the truth is, most of our day runs on autopilot. Clear explains that we're not really fighting against laziness or lack of discipline. We're fighting against the fact that our brains are incredibly efficient at turning repeated actions into unconscious patterns. The trick isn't to fight this tendency, but to work with it, like a skilled sailor using the wind instead of rowing against it. Consider how this applies to our modern, distraction-filled world. We're constantly battling notification pings, endless streaming options, and the general chaos of daily life. Traditional advice tells us to just be more disciplined, but Clear offers something more practical. Use the structure that's already there. Your existing habits are like anchor points in the storm of modern life. They're reliable, they're automatic, and they can become the foundation for the person you want to become. The beauty of this approach is that it works with human psychology instead of against it. You're not trying to become a completely different person overnight. You're simply adding small, strategic changes to the life you're already living. And as we'll discover, these small changes have a way of compounding into something much bigger than you might expect. Welcome back to One Book, One Coffee, where we're diving deep into James Clear's transformative insights about building better habits. You know, we've all been there, staring at the gym membership card gathering dust on our desk, promising ourselves we'll start that meditation practice tomorrow, or swearing we'll finally learn that new language. And what do we tell ourselves when we inevitably fall short? We blame our lack of motivation. But here's where Clear drops a truth bomb that might completely change how you think about habit formation. Motivation is overrated. Now, think about this for a moment. How many times have you waited to feel motivated before taking action? How many dreams have remained just dreams because you were waiting for that perfect surge of enthusiasm to carry you through? Clear argues that this approach is fundamentally flawed, and he's got the science to back it up. The real secret isn't about pumping yourself up with motivational speeches or waiting for lightning to strike. It's about making your habits so attractive that your brain can't help but want them. This brings us to one of the most powerful strategies in the entire book, temptation bundling. Picture this scenario that Clear shares. A woman named Ronan Bynes who absolutely loved watching Netflix but struggled to exercise regularly. Sound familiar? Instead of trying to force herself to love exercise or waiting for motivation to magically appear, she did something brilliant. She moved her stationary bike directly in front of her television and made a deal with herself. She could only watch her favorite shows while pedaling. Suddenly, exercise wasn't this dreaded chore she had to motivate herself to do. It became the gateway to something she genuinely craved. This is temptation bundling in action, and it's based on a fundamental principle that Clear calls the Pramack principle, named after psychologist David Pramack. The idea is elegantly simple. You take a behavior you want to do and pair it with a behavior you need to do. You're essentially hijacking your brain's existing reward pathways and redirecting them toward your desired habits. But let's dig deeper into why this works so powerfully. Your brain is constantly scanning the environment for rewards, and it's particularly drawn to immediate pleasures. When you bundle a habit you're trying to build with something you already find irresistible, you're not fighting against your brain's natural tendencies. You're working with them. It's like creating a Trojan horse for positive change, where the pleasure you already crave becomes the delivery mechanism for the habit you want to develop. Clear shares another fascinating example about a group of students who wanted to work out more but kept making excuses. Instead of relying on willpower or motivation, they created what they called want and need bundles. One student would only listen to his favorite podcast while at the gym. Another would only get her weekly pedicure after completing her workout routine. They weren't trying to love exercise for its own sake. They were making it irresistibly attractive by connecting it to things they already loved. Now you might be wondering, doesn't this feel a bit like bribing yourself? And honestly, that's exactly what it is, but here's the beautiful part. It works, and over time, something magical happens. As you consistently pair the habit with the reward, your brain begins to anticipate the pleasure even before you get the immediate gratification. Eventually, the habit itself becomes rewarding. It's like training your brain to crave the very behaviors that will improve your life. Think about how you could apply this in your own life right now. Maybe you've been struggling to read more books. What if you could only drink your favorite expensive coffee while reading? Or perhaps you want to practice a musical instrument but keep putting it off. What if you bundled practice time with listening to your favorite playlist afterward? The key is to be honest about what you genuinely crave, and then use those cravings as fuel for your desired habits. Clear also points out something crucial here. This isn't about perfection or permanent solutions. It's about creating systems that make good choices easier and bad choices harder. When you make your habits attractive through temptation bundling, you're not relying on the fleeting nature of motivation. You're building sustainable systems that work even when you don't feel like it. The beauty of this approach is that it acknowledges a fundamental truth about human nature. We're not robots programmed to do what's good for us. We're complex beings driven by desires, emotions, and immediate gratification. Instead of fighting this reality, temptation bundling embraces it and channels it toward positive outcomes. As we move forward in our exploration of atomic habits, remember this powerful insight. The most sustainable changes aren't built on motivation or willpower. They're built on making the right choices irresistibly attractive. Your future self will thank you for working with your brain's natural tendencies rather than against them. You know how we've been talking about building these tiny, powerful habits that compound over time? Well, Here's something that might surprise you as you're sipping your coffee this morning. The people around you have more influence over your success than you probably realize. James Clear dives deep into something absolutely fascinating in this section about how our family and friends essentially become the invisible architects of our behavior. Picture this for a moment. You walk into your friend's house, and without even thinking about it, you automatically lower your voice, take off your shoes, or grab a coaster for your drink. You're not consciously deciding to do these things, but somehow you just know what's expected. That's the power of social influence at work, and it's happening in your life every single day, shaping the habits you keep and the ones you abandon. Clear shares this incredible insight that really stopped me in my tracks. We don't just adopt habits in isolation. We absorb them from the tribes we belong to. Think about it. When you spend time with people who read every morning, you start eyeing that book on your nightstand. When your workout buddy texts you at 6 a.m. asking if you're ready for the gym, suddenly that early morning exercise routine doesn't seem so impossible. But here's the flip side that we don't always want to acknowledge. If you're surrounded by people who complain constantly, scroll endlessly through social media, or make excuses for unhealthy choices, guess what behaviors start creeping into your own life? The author tells this remarkable story about a man who wanted to quit smoking. He tried everything: willpower, patches, apps, you name it. Nothing worked until he made one crucial change. He started spending time with people who didn't smoke. Not people who were trying to quit, but people for whom smoking simply wasn't part of their identity. Within months, he had successfully quit, not through some heroic act of self-discipline, but because his environment had shifted so dramatically that smoking no longer felt normal or natural. Now, think about this in your own life. What habits are you trying to build right now? Maybe you want to eat healthier, write more, exercise regularly, or learn a new skill. Here's what Clear discovered through his research. The fastest way to build a new habit isn't to rely on your own motivation. It's to join a group where your desired behavior is already the norm. When something is normal in your social circle, it becomes almost effortless to maintain. But what if your current circle doesn't support the habits you want to build? This is where it gets really practical and, honestly, sometimes uncomfortable. Clear suggests that you might need to intentionally expand your social connections. Join a running club if you want to become a runner. Find a book club if you want to read more. Connect with entrepreneurs if you want to start a business. The key is surrounding yourself with people who already embody the identity you're trying to create. Here's a modern example that perfectly illustrates this principle. Think about how social media has created these virtual tribes around habits. You see fitness influencers sharing their morning routines, productivity experts showing their organized workspaces, or cooking enthusiasts posting their meal prep sessions. When you follow these accounts and engage with this content regularly, you're essentially joining a digital tribe that reinforces these behaviors. Your Instagram feed becomes a constant reminder of the habits you want to build. The flip side is equally powerful and perhaps more important to understand. Clear emphasizes that sometimes the people closest to us, often without meaning to, can become the biggest obstacles to our growth. That friend who always suggests ordering pizza when you're trying to eat healthy, or the family member who makes jokes about your new workout routine. They're not trying to sabotage you, but they're operating from their own comfort zones and sometimes feel threatened by your changes. This doesn't mean you need to cut people out of your life, but it does mean you need to be strategic about when and how you engage with different social influences. Maybe you meal prep with your health-conscious coworker, but save the pizza nights with old friends for special occasions. Maybe you share your writing goals with a friend who's also creative, but keep them private from the relative who always asks when you're going to get a real job. The beautiful thing about understanding social influence is that once you're aware of it, you can use it intentionally. You can become the person in your circle who models the behavior you want to see. When you consistently show up with healthy habits, positive attitudes, or productive routines, You're not just changing yourself. You're creating ripple effects that can influence everyone around you. As we move forward in our exploration of atomic habits, remember this fundamental truth. Behavior change is not just a personal journey, it's inherently social. The people you surround yourself with will either make your desired habits easier or harder to maintain. Choose your influences wisely, and don't underestimate the power of becoming a positive influence for others. You know, we've been talking about building good habits, but let's flip the script for a moment and grab another sip of that coffee while we dive into something equally important. What happens when you're stuck in a cycle of bad habits that just won't seem to break? You know the ones I'm talking about. Maybe it's reaching for your phone every 5 minutes, stress eating when deadlines loom, or binge-watching Netflix until 2 in the morning when you promised yourself you'd get to bed early. Here's the thing that most people miss entirely, and James Clear illuminates this beautifully in Atomic Habits. We spend so much energy fighting the surface behavior that we completely ignore what's happening underneath, like trying to kill a weed by cutting off the leaves while leaving the roots perfectly intact. Think about this for a second. When you reach for that bag of chips at 9 p.m., are you really hungry? Or are you bored, stressed, lonely, or seeking some kind of reward after a long day? Clear explains that every habit serves a deeper craving, and until we identify what that craving actually is, we're essentially shadow boxing with our own behavior. It's like being a detective in your own life, but instead of looking for clues about who committed the crime, you're investigating why you keep committing the same behavioral crime against your future self. Let me paint you a picture with a story Clear shares. There's this guy who couldn't stop checking social media. Every few minutes, ping, there he was scrolling through Instagram or Twitter, even when he was supposed to be working on important projects. He tried everything, deleted apps, used website blockers, even gave his phone to his wife. But somehow, he always found a way back to those digital rabbit holes. Sound familiar? Now, here's where it gets interesting. When he finally sat down and really examined what was happening in those moments right before he reached for his phone, he discovered something fascinating. He wasn't actually craving social media at all. What he was craving was connection, a sense of being part of something, relief from the isolation of working alone all day. The social media wasn't the real need, it was just the quickest available solution his brain had learned to reach for. This is what Clear calls addressing the underlying craving, and it's absolutely revolutionary when you really grasp it. Your bad habits aren't character flaws or signs of weakness. They're solutions, albeit imperfect ones, to legitimate human needs. The problem isn't that you have these needs, it's that you've trained your brain to meet them in ways that ultimately work against you. It's like your brain is a well-meaning but slightly confused personal assistant who keeps bringing you pizza when you ask for energy, or alcohol when you ask for relaxation. So how do you become a better detective in your own life? Clear suggests what he calls the pointing and calling method, borrowed from Japanese railway workers who dramatically reduced errors by literally pointing at signals and calling out what they observed. When you catch yourself in the middle of a bad habit, instead of immediately judging yourself or trying to stop, pause and ask, what am I really craving right here? Are you craving stimulation, comfort, connection, control, or maybe just a break from whatever you're supposed to be doing? Here's a modern example that hits close to home for many of us. Sarah, a marketing manager, found herself constantly snacking throughout her workday, especially during video calls. She'd mute herself and grab handfuls of whatever was nearby. At first, she thought she just had no willpower around food. But when she started paying attention to the pattern, she realized something crucial. The snacking always intensified during calls where she felt unheard or undervalued. Her real craving wasn't food at all. It was a sense of agency and control. Food was just something she could control when everything else felt chaotic and beyond her influence. Once Sarah identified this underlying pattern, she could start experimenting with better solutions. Instead of snacking during frustrating meetings, She started taking notes by hand, which gave her that same sense of doing something active and purposeful. She began speaking up more in meetings, which addressed the feeling of being unheard. The snacking didn't disappear overnight, but it dramatically decreased because she was finally feeding the right craving. Now, think about your own stubborn habits. What if that late-night phone scrolling isn't about entertainment, but about delaying tomorrow's responsibilities? What if that impulse shopping isn't about wanting stuff, but about seeking a hit of novelty and excitement in an otherwise predictable routine? What if that habit of interrupting people isn't rudeness, but an underlying craving to feel heard and significant? The beautiful thing about this approach is that once you identify the real craving, you can start designing better solutions. Instead of fighting against your nature, you're working with it, just redirecting that energy toward behaviors that actually serve your long-term goals. It's like being an engineer for your own life, understanding the underlying mechanics so you can build something better. As we wrap up this insight and perhaps finish that last sip of coffee, remember this: your bad habits aren't your enemy, they're messengers. They're telling you about unmet needs and pointing toward areas of your life that deserve attention and care. The question isn't how to eliminate these cravings, it's how to satisfy them in ways that make you proud of who you're becoming. Picture this: you're sitting at your kitchen table, coffee in hand, staring at that dusty guitar in the corner that you swore you'd learn to play 6 months ago. Or maybe it's that novel you promised yourself you'd write, or the morning workout routine that lasted exactly 3 days. We've all been there, haven't we? We start with these grand ambitions, these beautiful visions of who we want to become, and then reality hits like a cold splash of water. The thing is, most of us are approaching habit formation completely backwards, and James Clear has a brilliantly simple solution that might just change everything. Here's what Clear discovered, and it's so counterintuitive that it almost sounds ridiculous at first. The secret to building lasting habits isn't to go big and bold right out of the gate. It's to go embarrassingly small. He calls this the 2-minute rule, and it works like this. When you start a new habit, it should take you less than 2 minutes to do. Not 20 minutes, not even 10 minutes. 2 minutes. Maximum. Now think about this for a moment. What does this actually look like in practice? Instead of committing to read for 30 minutes every day, you commit to reading 1 page. Instead of doing a full workout, you put on your running shoes. Instead of meditating for 20 minutes, you take 1 deep breath. I know what you're thinking, but that's not going to get me anywhere. And that's exactly the point where most of us get it wrong. Clear tells the story of a photography professor who divided his class into 2 groups. One group would be graded on the quantity of their photos, the other on quality. The quantity group had to produce as many photos as possible, while the quality group only needed to submit 1 perfect photograph. Here's the fascinating part. At the end of the semester, the best photos all came from the quantity group. While the quality group spent their time theorizing about perfect composition and lighting, the quantity group was out there taking picture after picture, learning through repetition, getting better with each click of the shutter. This is the magic of the 2-minute rule in action. It's not about the 2 minutes themselves, it's about becoming the type of person who shows up consistently. Think of it like this. Every time you do your 2-minute habit, you're casting a vote for the identity you want to build. You're not just reading 1 page, you're becoming a reader. You're not just putting on running shoes, you're becoming an athlete. Each tiny action is proof to yourself that you are who you say you want to be. But here's where it gets really interesting. Clear emphasizes that you have to master the habit of showing up before you can improve the habit itself. It's like learning to walk before you run, except most of us are trying to sprint before we've even figured out how to stand up. The 2-minute rule forces you to focus on the system rather than the outcome, and that's where the real transformation happens. Consider how this plays out in our modern world. We're constantly bombarded with productivity hacks and life optimization strategies that promise dramatic results in record time. Social media feeds are filled with people sharing their intense workout routines, their elaborate morning rituals, their complex productivity systems. But what we don't see are the hundreds of small, unglamorous moments that built up to those impressive displays. The successful entrepreneur didn't start by working 16-hour days. They started by showing up to their desk for 10 minutes every morning. The beauty of starting ridiculously small is that it makes failure almost impossible. How hard is it to put on your running shoes? How difficult is it to write one sentence? The resistance that usually stops us dead in our tracks simply doesn't have a chance to build up. You're essentially sneaking past your brain's natural tendency to resist change by making the change so small it doesn't even register as threatening. And here's something remarkable that happens. Once you start, momentum naturally builds. You put on your running shoes and suddenly a quick walk around the block doesn't seem so crazy. You write one sentence and before you know it, you've written a paragraph. Clear calls this the power of ritualization. The 2-minute version becomes the gateway to the full habit, but more importantly, it establishes the neural pathway that makes the behavior automatic. As we move forward in our exploration of making habits easy, remember this. The goal isn't to stay at 2 minutes forever. The goal is to prove to yourself that you can be consistent, that you can be trusted to keep the promises you make to yourself. Once that foundation is solid, once showing up becomes as natural as breathing, then you can start to build something bigger. But it all starts with those precious 2 minutes, with the courage to begin small and the wisdom to understand that slow progress is still progress. The path to extraordinary results isn't paved with extraordinary efforts. It's built one tiny, consistent step at a time. You know that feeling when you're sitting at your desk, staring at your computer screen, knowing exactly what you need to do, but somehow your brain just refuses to cooperate. You open your laptop to write that report, but suddenly you find yourself checking social media for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. Sound familiar? Well, my friend, grab your coffee a little tighter, because James Clear has some fascinating insights about why this happens and, more importantly, how to fix it. Here's something that might surprise you. Procrastination isn't really about laziness or lack of willpower. It's about friction. Think about it this way: water always flows downhill, taking the path of least resistance. Our brains work exactly the same way. We naturally gravitate toward whatever feels easiest in the moment, and if there's too much friction between us and our good habits, we'll unconsciously choose the easier option every single time. Clear tells this brilliant story about a photographer who wanted to take more pictures but kept putting it off. The problem wasn't motivation. He loved photography. The issue was that his camera was tucked away in his closet, batteries were stored in a different drawer, and his memory cards were scattered around his desk. Every time he felt inspired to take photos, he'd have to hunt down all these pieces. By the time he gathered everything together, the moment had passed and his motivation had evaporated. Now, think about this. How many of your own good intentions get derailed by similar tiny obstacles? The solution was beautifully simple. He bought a small table, placed it right by his front door, and set up everything he needed in one spot: camera, charged batteries, memory cards, even a small cleaning cloth. Suddenly, grabbing his camera became as easy as picking up his keys. The friction disappeared, and with it, so did the procrastination. Within months, his photography habit transformed from something he talked about doing to something he actually did consistently. This is the magic of environment design, and it's happening all around us, often in ways we don't even notice. Ever wonder why grocery stores put candy at eye level near the checkout? Or why Netflix automatically starts playing the next episode? These companies understand friction better than most of us understand ourselves. They've made the behaviors they want us to adopt incredibly easy, while making alternatives more difficult. But here's where it gets really interesting. You can use these same principles to engineer your own success. Let's say you want to start exercising in the morning. Instead of relying on willpower to drag yourself out of bed and hunt for your workout clothes in the dark, what if you laid everything out the night before? Your clothes folded neatly on the chair, your water bottle filled and ready, your workout playlist queued up on your phone. Suddenly, the path from bed to exercise becomes smooth and frictionless. Clear introduces us to this concept he calls the 2-minute rule, which is absolutely genius in its simplicity. The idea is to scale down any habit until it takes less than 2 minutes to complete. Want to read more books? Don't commit to reading for an hour, commit to reading 1 page. Want to start meditating? Don't aim for 20 minutes, start with taking 3 deep breaths. This isn't about lowering your standards, it's about mastering the art of showing up. Now you might be thinking, but what's the point of reading just 1 page? Here's the thing, once you've read that 1 page, you've already overcome the biggest hurdle, getting started. More often than not, you'll find yourself reading a 2nd page, then a 3rd. But even if you don't, even if you truly stop at 1 page, you've still reinforced the identity of someone who reads daily. You've kept the habit alive, and that consistency is more valuable than any single burst of intense effort. The environment design principle extends far beyond just physical objects. It's about removing digital friction too. If you want to write more, keep a document open on your desktop. If you want to learn a language, put the app on your home screen where Netflix used to be. If you want to call your parents more often, put their numbers in your favorites and set a weekly reminder. On the flip side, if you want to break a bad habit, increase the friction. Want to watch less TV? Unplug it after each use and put the remote in another room. Want to eat less junk food? Don't keep it in the house, make yourself drive to the store every time you crave it. These small barriers often provide just enough resistance to break the automatic behavior pattern. The beautiful truth that Clear reveals is that small changes in context can lead to large changes in behavior over time. By thoughtfully designing your environment and reducing friction for good habits while increasing it for bad ones, you're not just changing what you do, you're changing who you become. This brings us naturally to an even deeper question about how our habits shape our identity, and how we can use this understanding to create lasting change in our lives. Picture yourself sitting in your favorite coffee shop, that warm mug in your hands, and we're diving into one of the most fascinating aspects of human behavior. We've been talking about how to build habits that stick, and now we're getting to the really juicy part. Why some habits feel effortless while others feel like pushing a boulder uphill every single day. Here's the thing that James Clear discovered, and it's going to change how you think about everything you do. The human brain is wired for immediate gratification. We're basically walking around with ancient hardware trying to run modern software, and that creates some interesting challenges. Our ancestors needed quick rewards to survive, find food, eat it immediately, live another day. But today, well, the best habits often have delayed rewards, and that's where we run into trouble. Think about this for a moment. When you eat a donut, you get immediate pleasure. Your taste buds light up, your brain releases dopamine, and you feel good right now. But when you go to the gym, you're sore, sweaty, tired, and the real benefits won't show up for weeks or months. Your brain is sitting there wondering why you're torturing yourself when you could be on the couch watching Netflix instead. Clear tells this incredible story about an economics professor who figured out a brilliant hack for this problem. He wanted to watch more foreign films, those subtitled movies that are supposedly good for you but feel like work when you're tired after a long day. So here's what he did. He bought a stationary bike and positioned it right in front of his TV. But here's the genius part. He only allowed himself to watch his favorite trashy reality shows while pedaling on that bike. Suddenly, exercise became the pathway to immediate pleasure, not delayed punishment. Now, this might sound almost too simple, but think about what's happening here. He took something his brain wanted right now, mindless entertainment, and bundled it with something that was good for him in the long run. It's like tricking your brain into thinking vegetables taste like chocolate cake. The secret sauce here is what Clear calls making habits satisfying through immediate rewards. Your brain doesn't care about your future self as much as you think it does. It cares about right now, this moment, this feeling. So if you want to stick with good habits every day, you need to give your brain a reason to celebrate immediately. Let me paint you another picture. Sarah, a busy marketing executive, struggled for years to maintain a morning workout routine. She'd start strong every January, but by February, she was hitting snooze and making excuses. Then she discovered something that changed everything. After every workout, she allowed herself to buy an expensive coffee from her favorite cafe on the way to work. Not just any coffee, the fancy $12 one with oat milk and extra shots that she normally felt guilty about purchasing. Suddenly, working out wasn't about some abstract future version of herself being healthier. It was about that immediate reward, that little luxury that made her morning feel special. The workout became the price of admission to something she genuinely enjoyed. Within 3 months, she was working out 6 days a week, and the habit felt automatic. But here's where it gets really interesting. You don't always need external rewards. Sometimes the most powerful immediate satisfaction comes from simply acknowledging what you've accomplished. Clear talks about the power of tracking your habits, and there's something deeply satisfying about putting that checkmark on your calendar or watching your streak grow day by day. It's like collecting coins in a video game. Logically, you know those digital coins aren't real, but your brain lights up every time you collect one. The same thing happens when you mark off a completed habit. You get that little hit of dopamine that says, "Good job, you did the thing." Think about this in your own life. What habits are you struggling with right now? Maybe you want to read more, meditate daily, or finally learn that language you've been talking about for years. The reason you're struggling probably isn't lack of willpower, it's lack of immediate satisfaction. Your brain is doing the math, and deciding the immediate cost isn't worth the delayed benefit. So here's your homework, if you will. Pick one habit you want to build and ask yourself, how can I make this immediately satisfying? Maybe it's buying yourself a special bookmark after every reading session, or treating yourself to a fancy tea after meditation, or allowing yourself to watch a favorite show only while doing that language learning app. The beautiful thing about this approach is that over time, many habits become intrinsically rewarding. Eventually, Sarah didn't need the expensive coffee anymore because she genuinely loved how exercise made her feel. But she needed that bridge, that immediate reward to carry her through until the long-term benefits kicked in. As we wrap up this insight and prepare for our next discussion, remember this. You're not weak for wanting immediate gratification. You're human. The trick is designing your environment and your reward systems so that your very human brain wants to do the things that your future self will thank you for. Picture this. You're sitting at your kitchen table on a Tuesday morning, coffee in hand, and you've just made yet another promise to yourself about going to the gym. Sound familiar? We've all been there, haven't we? But here's the thing that James Clear wants us to understand about accountability partners, and it's going to change how you think about sticking to your habits forever. You know, there's something almost magical that happens when we shift from making promises to ourselves to making promises to other people. Think about it for a moment. When was the last time you broke a commitment you made to a close friend? Now compare that to how often you've broken promises you made to yourself. The difference is striking, isn't it? Clear tells us about a fascinating study where researchers wanted to see how accountability affected people's exercise habits. They divided participants into 3 groups. The first group simply had to read some motivational material about exercise. The second group did the same, but they also had to formulate a plan for when and where they would exercise. Now here's where it gets interesting. The third group did everything the second group did, but with one crucial addition. They had to send a copy of their exercise plan to a friend and commit to sending weekly reports on their progress. The results? Absolutely mind-blowing. The first group showed up to exercise 35% of the time. Not terrible, but not great either. The second group, with their specific plans, did much better at 91%. But get this, the third group, the one with accountability partners, showed up an incredible 95% of the time. That's the power of social accountability right there. But why does this work so well? Clear explains that we humans are fundamentally social creatures. We care deeply about what others think of us, and will go to great lengths to avoid looking bad in front of people we respect. It's not vanity, it's evolution. For thousands of years, being cast out from the group meant death. So our brains are literally wired to avoid social rejection. Now think about this in your own life. When you tell someone you're going to do something, you're essentially putting your reputation on the line. Suddenly, that workout isn't just about you anymore. It's about being the kind of person who keeps their word. It's about maintaining your identity as someone reliable, someone trustworthy. Clear shares a brilliant example about a writer who was struggling to finish his book. Every day he'd sit down with good intentions, but somehow the hours would slip away. Social media, emails, random internet rabbit holes, you know the drill. Then he made a simple change. He started working at a coffee shop where he knew the barista. Every morning, he'd tell her exactly what he planned to accomplish that day. Just that small act of declaring his intentions to another person transformed his productivity. He finished the book within months. But here's what makes accountability partners even more powerful. They don't just create consequences for failure, they also create witnesses for success. When you achieve your goal, you get to share that victory with someone who's been rooting for you. That celebration reinforces the positive feelings associated with the habit, making you more likely to repeat it. The beauty of this system is that it works both ways. When you become an accountability partner for someone else, you're not just helping them, you're strengthening your own commitment to growth and improvement. It's like having a workout buddy. You both show up not just for yourselves, but for each other. In our digital age, accountability has become easier than ever to implement. You can text your progress to a friend, post updates on social media, or join online communities centered around your goals. Some people even use apps that donate money to causes they dislike if they don't follow through on their commitments. Talk about raising the stakes. But Clear warns us about something important here. The key isn't just having someone watch you, it's having the right someone watch you. Your accountability partner should be someone whose opinion you value, someone who will actually follow up, and someone who understands the importance of what you're trying to achieve. A casual acquaintance who forgets to check and won't have the same impact as a close friend who genuinely cares about your success. The most successful people understand this principle intuitively. They surround themselves with others who share their values and aspirations. They join groups, hire coaches, and create systems where their progress is visible to others. They know that while motivation gets you started, accountability keeps you going. As we continue exploring Clear's insights into habit formation, remember that changing your life doesn't have to be a solo journey. Sometimes the most powerful step you can take is simply telling someone else where you're headed and asking them to help keep you on track. Picture this. You're sitting in a coffee shop, watching a barista effortlessly craft the perfect latte art while simultaneously taking orders and managing 3 different brewing methods. Meanwhile, you're struggling to remember if you put sugar in your own cup. We've all been there, haven't we? Watching someone excel at something that seems impossibly difficult to us, wondering if we're just missing some secret ingredient called talent. James Clear tackles this fascinating puzzle in one of the most eye-opening sections of Atomic Habits, and what he reveals might completely change how you think about your own potential. You see, we've been fed this myth that talent is everything, that some people are just born winners while the rest of us are destined to struggle. But here's what Clear discovered through years of research and observation. Talent isn't the magic bullet we think it is, and more importantly, you already possess talents you probably don't even recognize. Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates this point. Clear tells us about a young man named Scott Adams, the creator of the Dilbert comic strip. Now, Adams wasn't the world's best artist, he wasn't the funniest person alive, and he certainly wasn't a business genius when he started. But here's the fascinating part. He was reasonably good at drawing, reasonably funny, and had a decent understanding of the corporate world from his day job. When he combined these modest talents, something magical happened. He created one of the most successful comic strips in history, not because he was exceptional at any one thing, but because he found a unique intersection of his natural abilities. This is what Clear calls the talent stack, and it's absolutely revolutionary when you think about it. Instead of trying to be the best in the world at one specific skill, you can become extraordinarily valuable by being pretty good at several complementary skills. It's like cooking, isn't it? You don't need to be a master of every single technique, but if you can combine decent knife skills, good timing, and an understanding of flavors, you can create meals that wow people. Now think about this for a moment. What are you naturally drawn to? What activities make you lose track of time? Clear argues that these aren't random preferences, they're clues to your genetic predispositions. Your genes don't determine your destiny, but they do influence what feels easy versus what feels like swimming upstream. And here's the beautiful part. When you build habits around your natural inclinations, everything becomes easier and more enjoyable. Consider the story of Michael Phelps, which Clear uses to illustrate this perfectly. Yes, Phelps worked incredibly hard, but he also happened to have a body almost perfectly designed for swimming. His wingspan is longer than his height, his torso is unusually long, and his feet are practically flippers. When he built his training habits around these natural advantages, the results were extraordinary. But here's what's crucial to understand. Phelps didn't choose his genetics, but he did choose to align his habits with them. The same principle applies to you, even if you're not destined for Olympic glory. Maybe you're naturally curious about how things work, making you perfect for troubleshooting problems at work. Perhaps you're naturally empathetic, giving you an edge in building relationships and understanding customer needs. Or maybe you have an eye for detail that others miss, making you invaluable in quality control or design work. Clear introduces us to what he calls the explore-exploit trade-off, borrowed from computer science but incredibly relevant to human development. In your 20s and 30s, you should be exploring, trying different things, paying attention to what energizes you versus what drains you. Then, as you discover your strengths, you shift toward exploiting them, building deeper habits and skills in those areas where you have natural advantages. But here's where it gets really interesting. Clear warns us about the dark side of focusing only on our strengths. If you only do what comes naturally, you might miss opportunities to develop crucial skills that don't feel easy at first. The key is finding the sweet spot where you're leveraging your natural abilities, while still pushing yourself to grow in complementary areas. Think about the most successful people you know personally. I bet they're not necessarily the most naturally gifted, but they've figured out how to build systems and habits that amplify their existing strengths while minimizing their weaknesses. They've learned to play a game that suits their natural abilities rather than forcing themselves into a mold that doesn't fit. This insight leads us to a profound realization about habit formation itself. When your habits align with your natural tendencies, they require less willpower to maintain. It's like the difference between swimming with the current versus against it. You'll still need to put in effort, but the effort feels more sustainable, more enjoyable, even energizing rather than depleting. As we move forward in our exploration of atomic habits, keep this truth about talent close to heart. You don't need to be gifted at everything, but you do need to be honest about what comes naturally to you. Then build your habit systems around those insights. Picture this. You're sitting at your favorite coffee shop, watching a toddler try to put together a puzzle. If the puzzle is too easy with just 4 big pieces, the child gets bored and walks away. If it's too hard with 1,000 tiny pieces, they get frustrated and give up. But when you hand them a puzzle with just the right number of pieces, something magical happens. They become completely absorbed, working with intense focus until that final piece clicks into place. This, my friend, is what James Clear calls the Goldilocks Rule in action. The Goldilocks Rule states that humans experience peak motivation when working on tasks that are right on the edge of their current abilities. Not too hard, not too easy, but just right. Think about the last time you felt completely engaged in an activity. Maybe you were learning a new song on guitar, tackling a challenging work project, or even playing a video game. I bet that activity was stretching your skills just enough to keep you interested, but not so much that you wanted to throw in the towel. Clear illustrates this beautifully with the story of tennis players. Imagine you're a decent tennis player and you have 3 potential opponents. The first is a complete beginner who can barely get the ball over the net. Playing against them would be like that 4-piece toddler puzzle, boring and pointless. The third opponent is a professional who could beat you blindfolded. That's the 1,000-piece puzzle, impossible and demoralizing. But the second opponent, they're just slightly better than you, maybe winning 60% of the points while you win 40. Suddenly, every rally matters. Every point feels winnable. You're completely dialed in because you're operating right at the edge of your abilities. This principle explains so much about our modern world. Why do we get addicted to social media? Because the intermittent rewards, the likes and comments, come at just the right frequency to keep us engaged. Why do video games generate billions in revenue? Because the best games are masterfully designed to keep players in that Goldilocks zone, always presenting challenges that are difficult but achievable. Level 1 isn't impossibly hard, but it's not insultingly easy either. As you improve, the game gets harder, maintaining that perfect balance. Now, think about this in terms of your own habit formation. If you're trying to build a reading habit and you decide to read War and Peace on day 1, you're setting yourself up for that 1,000-piece puzzle frustration. But if you commit to reading just 1 page a day, you might find yourself in the 4-piece puzzle territory, where the task feels so trivial it doesn't generate any sense of accomplishment or momentum. The sweet spot, maybe it's reading for 10 minutes a day or finishing 1 chapter or reading until you've learned something new. It should feel like a gentle stretch, not a painful strain. You should finish feeling accomplished but not exhausted, satisfied but not overwhelmed. Clear shares fascinating research showing that when people work on tasks that match their skill level, they enter what psychologists call a flow state. Time seems to disappear. Self-consciousness fades. They become completely absorbed in the present moment. But here's the crucial insight. This only happens when the challenge level increases along with your abilities. If you keep doing the same workout routine for months without progression, boredom creeps in. If you suddenly jump to an expert-level routine, frustration takes over. This is why so many New Year's resolutions fail spectacularly. People go from 0 exercise to planning 2-hour gym sessions 6 days a week. They leap from never meditating to attempting hour-long silent retreats. They're violating the Goldilocks Rule, jumping straight into the frustration zone, instead of gradually building up their capacity. But what happens when you've been working on a habit for months and it starts feeling automatic? This is actually a good problem to have, but it requires a thoughtful response. Clear suggests that as habits become easier, you need to deliberately increase the challenge to stay engaged. If your daily walk has become effortless, maybe it's time to add hills or increase the distance. If writing 300 words feels routine, perhaps aim for 500. The beauty of the Goldilocks Rule is that it creates a sustainable path forward. Instead of relying on motivation, which comes and goes like the weather, you're designing challenges that naturally generate engagement. You're working with your brain's wiring, not against it. As we wrap up this insight, remember that finding your Goldilocks zone isn't a one-time calculation. It's an ongoing dance between challenge and ability, requiring constant small adjustments as you grow. The goal isn't to make things harder for the sake of difficulty, but to maintain that sweet spot where growth feels both challenging and achievable. Because when you get this balance right, consistency stops being a struggle and starts being a natural expression of who you're becoming. Picture this: you finally built that morning routine you've been dreaming about. You wake up at 6, meditate for 10 minutes, hit the gym, and fuel your body with a nutritious breakfast. For months, this felt like a victory lap every single day. But now something strange is happening. You're going through the motions, but that spark of intentionality has dimmed. You're brushing your teeth while thinking about your grocery list, working out while mentally rehearsing that presentation, eating breakfast while scrolling through emails. Welcome to what James Clear calls the downside of creating good habits, and trust me, this is where things get really interesting. Now, think about this for a moment. We spend so much energy trying to build good habits that we rarely pause to consider what happens after we've successfully automated them. It's like finally learning to drive a car. Remember those first few weeks behind the wheel? Every turn signal, every lane change, every parking maneuver demanded your complete attention. But now, you can probably drive to work while having a phone conversation, planning your weekend, and mentally calculating whether you have enough gas to make it through the week. This automation is both a blessing and a curse. James Clear reveals a fascinating paradox here. The very thing that makes habits so powerful, their ability to become automatic, can also become their greatest weakness. When behaviors become so routine that we perform them without conscious thought, we stop paying attention to the small errors that creep in. We stop looking for ways to improve. It's like that friend who learned to play guitar 20 years ago and still plays the same 3 chords the exact same way, never progressing beyond that comfortable plateau. Clear illustrates this with a story that'll make you rethink everything you know about expertise. He talks about how even highly skilled professionals can fall into this trap. Consider a surgeon who has performed thousands of operations. After years of practice, certain procedures become so automatic that they might stop noticing subtle changes in technique that could make them even more effective. Or think about a chef who has made the same signature dish hundreds of times, but stops tasting and adjusting because muscle memory has taken over. The real kicker is what Clear calls the plateau of latent potential. Picture a graph in your mind. Most people expect their progress to look like a steady upward slope, but reality looks more like a series of plateaus with occasional breakthroughs. During these flat periods, it feels like you're not making progress at all, even though you're still showing up and doing the work. This is where most people get discouraged and quit, not realizing they're often just one small adjustment away from their next breakthrough. But here's where it gets practical and exciting. Clear doesn't just diagnose the problem, he gives us the antidote. The solution lies in what he calls deliberate practice, combined with periodic reflection and review. Think of it like this: if habits are the compound interest of self-improvement, then reflection and review are the quarterly portfolio assessments that ensure you're still on track toward your goals. One powerful strategy Clear suggests is conducting regular habit reviews. Imagine sitting down once a month, maybe with that same cup of coffee you're enjoying right now, and honestly evaluating your routines. What's working? What isn't? Where have you started going through the motions? It's like being your own personal trainer, but for your entire life system. You might discover that your morning meditation has become a mental to-do list session, or that your evening reading time has turned into mindless scrolling. The key insight here is that awareness is the antidote to automaticity. When we bring conscious attention back to our automated behaviors, we can catch those small errors before they compound into bigger problems. It's like regularly recalibrating a compass to ensure you're still heading in the right direction. Clear also emphasizes the importance of gradually raising the bar. Once a habit becomes easy and automatic, that's not the time to coast. It's the time to level up. If you've been walking for 30 minutes every day and it feels effortless, Maybe it's time to add some hills or increase your pace. If you've been reading 10 pages a day without effort, perhaps it's time to tackle more challenging material or increase to 15 pages. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it transforms the potential downside of habits into an opportunity for continuous growth. Instead of letting automation lead to stagnation, we can use it as a foundation for reaching even higher levels of performance. It's the difference between being on autopilot and being on a trajectory toward mastery. As we move forward in our exploration of atomic habits, remember this crucial lesson. The goal isn't just to build habits, but to build systems that continue to serve and challenge us as we evolve. Because the moment we stop paying attention is the moment we stop growing. As we reach the end of our journey through Atomic Habits, let's take a moment to appreciate what James Clear has given us. Not just another productivity system, but a profound understanding of how change actually works. This isn't about willpower or motivation. It's about designing a life where good habits happen naturally, almost effortlessly. Clear shows us that we are not victims of our circumstances, but architects of our own transformation. Every single day, through the smallest actions, we are voting for the type of person we want to become. The person who writes one sentence is becoming a writer. The person who does one push-up is becoming someone who exercises. The person who puts their phone in another room is becoming someone who focuses deeply. Here are the key takeaways that can transform how you approach change. First, start ridiculously small, so small it feels almost silly. Want to read more? Commit to 1 page, not 30 minutes. Want to meditate? Start with 1 breath, not 10 minutes. When you make the habit so easy that you can't say no, you remove the friction that kills most good intentions. Be patient with yourself here. This isn't about being lazy, it's about being strategic. Second, focus on systems, not goals. Goals are about the results you want to achieve. Systems are about the processes that lead to those results. If you want to lose weight, don't obsess over the number on the scale. Build the system of someone who eats nutritiously and moves regularly. The goal gives you direction, but the system gets you there. Third, design your environment to make good habits obvious and bad habits invisible. Put your running shoes by your bed. Hide your phone in a drawer when you need to focus. Keep healthy snacks at eye level and junk food out of sight. Your environment shapes your behavior more than you realize, so make it work for you, not against you. Fourth, attach new habits to existing ones using habit stacking. After I pour my morning coffee, I will write in my journal. After I sit down at my desk, I will open my most important project first. Use the momentum of established routines to carry new behaviors forward. Finally, focus on identity, not outcomes. Don't just say, I want to write a book. Say, I am a writer. Every time you sit down to write, even for 5 minutes, you're proving to yourself that writers write. You're literally becoming the person you want to be, one small action at a time. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below with at least one idea from this book that stuck with you, one concept you're going to carry forward. It could be something that challenged your thinking, something you want to try, or even something you disagreed with. Your insight might be exactly what another listener needs to hear today. And if this summary gave you something valuable, a new perspective, a spark of motivation, or even just a peaceful hour with your coffee, share it with someone who might need it too. Subscribe to One Book, One Coffee, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new summary. Every week, we sit down together with one great book, one warm cup of coffee, and the simple belief that wisdom, shared well, can change lives. Until next time, keep reading, keep growing, and remember, every small step counts. See you at the next book.